We're going to talk about generators a little bit today. And as we see here, a guide for inspecting residential generator systems for homes for you guys, home inspectors. So what I'd like to accomplish today is to share a little bit about what a generator is, how it works. Also talk a little bit about how I approach a job before installing a generator. So what are the things that I'm looking for around the property, as well as showing some intricate parts inside of the parts of a standby generator system. So you have the generator, you have the ATS and things of that nature. I'd like to go over that with you as well, some parts of that. And then I'll have a checklist for you all as well. So when you're approaching a job that you can actually look and say, okay, this works, this doesn't work. And then I'll also have one of my favorite things is the EMF radiation. Of course, generators do provide EMF, but outside of generators, I thought it would be important to share with you something that you could take along with you when you're inspecting homes to make sure that these homes are safe with the EMF radiation and testing and metering. So let's get started here. And also a little bit of code references as well. So what is a generator? Anybody know what a generator is? Okay, well, the definition, of course, a generator converts mechanical energy into electrical power, and it provides backup for usually outages. One of the things that we noticed during COVID is a lot of folks were calling for generator installs because a lot of folks at the government and all have to work from home, of course, as you know, so they need the power. Recently, the other day, I was at a client's home, and he says his job actually requires them to have a generator. So it's actually a requirement for his job to have a generator at home. Does the company pay for it? No, they don't, but they require him to work there. He needs to have a generator to work remotely and all. How does it work? It has an engine, a prime mover that drives an alternator that creates electricity and current. So in houses, there are two pretty much generators that we use, and that's the standby generator system and the portable one. So as I was preparing this presentation, I was sitting there thinking about my old man. And my old man actually has a generator. He has a portable generator. And nothing is done as far as code with my old man. He doesn't have the interlock or anything of that nature. So, and he'll roll it around, put it in the driveway in case of an emergency. He does have an inlet outlet on the or plug outside to be able to power up the house and all. And I was thinking about that. I said, maybe I should go over there and install that interlock breaker for him and all. So let's get to it. So some of the things that I consider when doing an installation, of course, is there fuel present at the property? Do they have natural gas? Do they have a tank, propane tank? What is it that they have? So that can determine what type of generator. It will determine the location of the generator as well, and also the cost, because most of our clients want to know whether or not, they can afford this installation. So I've had a project where the tank was probably 70 feet away from the house, so what are we going to do in this instance? Because you got to run a separate line for that far as the fuel. So paying attention to that. Load calculations. One of the things here that I've done, you'll have a conversation with the homeowner. What is it that you want to protect? And most of them are the usual things, the refrigerator, the AC. They also possibly want their bedroom. These are central loads. So in this instance here, you see one panel too. This particular house here had 3 panels. It's a 600 amp service. It's a 14,000 square foot home. Although this guy spent all this money on his home, he didn't want to spend a lot of money on a generator service. So what he said, he says, I just want these essentials. So these are the circuits that I want. I want the first floor lights. I want the office. I want the Wi-Fi. I want the refrigerator. So he's telling me all these loads. So what we did out of these 3 panels here, we've actually consolidated and put them in panel 2, and then moved the other circuits that weren't essential to these other panels. And what I did over a week's time is I put this smart metering system in here, as you see these CTs here, and we monitored his electricity for over a week. And then we saw what his peak load was to make sure that the generator would be able to sustain and be able to carry what he wanted as far as his loads. So that's one way that we do that as well. So location, of course, is very key. As you all know, I would go real quick to, let me see, I went back too far. Let's see here. So location is key. So is there a flat surface available to be able to install the generator? Do we have to remove some greenery? There was one job, these people had the perfect flat patio or surface there to install a generator, but it was weeds and everything all over this place. And I did not necessarily have it in my budget to do that, but to have a professional installation, I went ahead and paid some laborers to come through and clean up. They had vines going all up on the wall all throughout. We cleaned that space out, really beautiful. And it was a nice flat surface where we didn't have to pour a concrete pad and all, and we mounted it. So with generators, of course, you want the exhaust, and the exhaust is on this side away from the breaker side. You want to make sure that that's at least 5 foot or greater away from any windows, any doors, any vents of that nature. You want to make sure that it's at least 5 foot away. And as you see this AC unit, you want it at least 3 foot away from the AC unit. Okay, and it's not that the AC unit actually has duct work going and traveling back into the home. It's just for working clearance for the AC and the service techs for the generator and the AC unit itself. So this is a generator that I installed probably 10 years ago. And as I'm looking at it, I see that it's starting to sink a little bit. And hey, did we actually install it in a wet location with a drain? As you see right here, you have the downspout right here. And I guess I got my pointer here. So we have the downspout over here coming down, but the water, it's connected all the way down to here past the generator, about 12 foot past it. So you have a little soft space here. So I'm thinking over the last 10 years, it's starting to sink a little bit. We loosen it up, jack it up, put some more rocks and things underneath of it to build it back up there. So also, if you know that gas is present, most homeowners should have CO2 in the house. Not necessarily saying that they do, but sometimes they don't. But just in this case, as you see his little windows open, a little bit of carbon monoxide possibly could seep into the house. When it comes to portable generators, there was a storm down in North Carolina, and my uncle decided to start the generator. They lost power for a couple days. And he actually, instead of putting it outside, of course, when it's raining and storming, he decided to put it in the garage. And what happened was everyone in the house got sick. Thank God that they did not go to sleep with that generator running, but my aunt, my uncle, and my niece had to go to the hospital. They had carbon monoxide poisoning in their systems. So it's very important that we do not, no matter what the conditions are, putting a generator in your garage. Unless you actually have exhaust piping that's going through it to take it outside like most commercial buildings have. But they usually have louvered doors in those establishments and rooms where there's a generator inside the building. So you want to make sure that you definitely place it outside for sure. Okay. All right, so go back. So So grounding is definitely very important. Grounding can determine whether or not someone lives or dies when they come in contact with the surface of a piece of electrical equipment. And it's very important that you pay attention to the grounding, and we'll go over a little bit of grounding today as well. So definitely paying attention to the grounding. So anyone know what this unit is over here on the right? This unit, anyone know what this is? Yes. Yes, sir. It is a transfer switch. So says, of course, at the top, huh? Okay. So automatic transfer switch. So this is an ATS, of course, is short for that. So as an inspector, when you're coming out and if you're looking at a transfer switch, you want to make, if it's outside, you want to make sure that it is maintaining its NEMA 3R rating. And that means that, okay, no one has penetrated in the top. You don't have water infiltration coming inside of the unit. And if you look inside this unit, you don't see any rust or anything of that nature. So water has not infiltrated this unit here. So a great thing to look at is the lock nuts. So where you see these conduits coming into the ATS, into this housing, you have these male adapters from the PVC that's coming in, and each one has a lock nut around it, making sure that it's tight. So you want to make sure that they are tight, because anytime you have any loose connection, either from the enclosure or the conduits, it's potential that the wires may become loose. And when the wires become loose, next thing you know, now you may have a little bit of charring. So you lose the ampacity. So for an example, your service feed coming from the meter comes into this ATS and it goes through this transfer and it's all contacted. So, okay, these wires, we have 200 amp capability. We have an ampacity of 200 amps. But if it gets loose, we got a little resistance. Instead of actually being able to carry 200 amps, now we may be only able to carry 100 amps. So now you start having some heating taking place, and now it starts charring, and now you actually have resistance and all. And next thing you know, you're going to have possibly some burning, possible electrical condition. You're going to lose power in the house, and the homeowner is going to be without power. So keep that in mind. The lock nuts is not just to actually, and this when you have metal raceways coming into it, it's good to keep a bond with that lock nut. In this instance, it's PVC. So you just want to make sure that the whole housing and everything is sound. All right. So examine the wire connections. That's nothing new. You guys do that in houses all the time in your electrical panels. But inside of the ATS, the same thing, nothing shy of that. You look at your connections and make sure that the terminals are nice and tight and all, just as I mentioned, potential charring and things of that nature, you losing the ampacity if something is loose. So making sure that it's tight. Also, if you see the aluminum wiring, you know that you're going to have your inhibitor on there for oxidation. And with an ATS, if it's outside, you're definitely going to have heat changing. So in the summer, it's going to be very hot. In the winter, it's going to be very cold. So that to try and prevent that aluminum from expanding and contracting, you put that inhibitor on there so that your connections stay nice and tight. So here at the top, you see those two wires on the top there. That's the cover there is called an arc shield, and you have the red one at the bottom as well. So making sure that you have the arc shield. One of the suggestions that I make before anyone goes into the ATS cabinet itself, and if you're going to inspect these connections, I suggest and recommend that you go to the generator and turn off the breaker. So for an example, if the electrical utility decides to not provide power in this instance, and you're standing right in front of this, and you got the arc shield off, and you're just in there, and next thing you know, the load transfers in front of you. You're not sure of the stability of this unit here. You may have an arc in your face. You never know what may happen. So just to protect yourself, I would suggest that you turn off the breaker at the generator before. When I was in high school, I was in a vocational program, and it was a 2-year program. And one of the things that I kept remembering my instructor saying to us is never stand behind someone working an electrical panel. And shortly after graduated from high school, I became an electrical helper for a contractor. And we were working in this basement. And I don't know, do you call it a cellar when you're in a basement where they got like dirt down in the basement and all? Cellar. Yeah. And so we're down there in electrical panels down there. And the mechanic that I'm working with, he's in the panel and he's working. And just as soon as it came to me, what my high school vocational trainer said, never stand behind someone, I stood to the side of him, and I would say like simultaneously, he dropped a screwdriver in there. You had a phase to phase, and it said boom. And I tell you, this guy actually was knocked back like 12 to 15 feet. And now it's pitch black in the cellar. No one said anything for like 30 seconds. It was just silence. Silence. And I'm like, what's going on? And next thing you know, I see a cigarette lighter go. And he said, you all right, man? I said, no, are you all right? And he goes with his lighter. He's in the panel and he's looking, and next thing you know, the power's back on. And I said, never stand behind someone that's in an electrical panel. You just never know. I know me personally, I've been shocked so many times and dealing with wires and stuff, something springing back, a wire, screwdriver twist, your elbow is on something, whatever the case may be. So just always take, precautions when you're in these hot cabinets and all. So those arc shields are very important, but if you're going to look at the connections behind them, you have to remove them. And the one with the red, you just got to squeeze that little spring there that comes out, and you can look at the connections there as well. So this little black thing here, that's called the transfer mechanism. So it actually works off of magnetism as well. You energize the coil and it either goes on or off. And it's an interesting thing. I was called to a job where a contractor was power washing in a basement, and his son got really, really happy with this power washing. He's just power washing this ATS in the basement. And it was like he just couldn't get enough. He just wanted to clean it all off. And next thing you know, water, it did infiltrate the ATS, and it got all the way down in there, and it actually got to that mechanism, and it burned up, and it burned up a lot of things in there. I ended up replacing the mechanism there, the transfer mechanism. So don't test water with the electricity, because it definitely will short out, burn up, and things of that nature. So looking inside of this, as I mentioned, that the grounding is very important. So in your houses right now, when the electrical service comes in, usually your main disconnect is in the house inside of your panel. Unless your panel is further than, let's say, 5 foot from your meter or whatever, then you have a disconnect outside and all. So this now becomes the service disconnect here, this ATS. So now that means your inside panel is going to become your sub panel. So that means that you need to take a neutral from here into your electrical panel. So this particular grounding here has your neutral from the generator, it has the neutral from the utility, and it has the neutral going to the electrical panel. And instead of now having your grounding electrode from your ground rods out in the earth, they're now coming to here, to your ground bar. And you're also going to have your cold water bond at this location as well. And as you see, let's see, get this thing right here. All right, so you see the green wire there. That's your bonding jumper, bonding the ground and the neutral together. So if you're coming out and inspecting and you do not see a bonding jumper anywhere, then there's a problem. Yes.
So if I understand correctly, the existing home, you got the existing ground, it's usually tied back to the panel.
Okay.
The main panel.
Yes.
Now you put in a generator and an ATS.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm hearing you properly, you actually should disconnect that ground, the main panel, and reroute everything to the ATS, so the single point of ground is at the ATS?
Yes. Now, keep in mind, if it's an essential where you may have an ATS just for a certain amount of circuits, let's say that the main panel is just feeding an ATS, then the main panel still stays at it. But if it's whole house like this, then that's where it actually becomes.
Comes down to, is the ATS effectively being used as a sub panel or main?
I wouldn't say, yes, in a sense, yes.
In a sense,
Yeah, yes,
right?
yes, right.
So
Because you do have those sub-panel ATS units, yes.
So if the ATS is effectively a sub panel, then you handle the grounding like you would a sub panel. But if you got a main panel, but now the ATS in effect replaces the main panel, and you're converting the main panel to a sub panel, as you said a moment ago,
Mhm.
now the ground has to be done at the ATS, and the old panel now must be wired hot and neutral, ground and neutral, as though it was a sub panel.
Right. Yes, so you guys come out, you want to make sure that you do see that bonding jumper there. Give me 1 second. You want to make sure that you do see that bonding jumper there. And you also want to make sure that your grounding electrode comes up as well. Go ahead, my man.
So I'm not a home inspector, but this is for the home inspectors. If you find something that isn't grounded or bonded correctly, CSST gas line, this main panel, who do you call?
If you,
Electrician?
as a home inspector,
Who do you tell them to call?
an electrical
Not me.
contractor.
They ask me all the time. It's the HVAC.
Okay, yes. Yeah, recommend them to an electrical contractor. Absolutely. For sure. So one of the things in this ATS, I was like, why is there so many different grounds up there, right? So if we start counting them up at the top, you got the one from the generator. You have the one going back to the panel. You got the grounding electrode. You got the cold water, and then you got a third one. And as you just mentioned, for the gas that has that CSST, that's why you have that third ground there. So it came here to this ATS here. So another thing that I suggest and recommend, are you guys looking to test generators to make sure that you tell the homeowners it works or it doesn't work?
No.
No? Okay. Well, just in case you did, in this instance, what you would do is that 200 amp breaker, if you turned it off, that would simulate you losing the utility power. And basically, the generator would start up, it would sense the loss of voltage, it would start up, and once it actually gets to the proper usable voltage, then that transfer switch would transfer over, and now you would have generator power, and you could actually do that test there. So just actually turning that off, boom. I would suggest and recommend that you turn it off with the shield, with the dead front on it, as I mentioned earlier. You don't want to take those risks. So having this dead front on here. So if you take the cover off and you got the dead front visible, you have this little yellow handle. Now, there are sometimes that those transfer mechanisms fail. And if it fails and someone wants to have power, then they actually can manually transfer it. And with this little stick, this little handle here, you'll stick it in right into the yellow piece over here, right there, this little hole right there. You'll stick it right in there, you pull it down, and you can transfer power. Let's say if it doesn't transfer power back when you actually, electrical utility was restored, you can manually transfer it as well. So this is a manual system as well. So you all can make sure that the breaker size is appropriate. You know, you got the 4-aught wire here coming in, so you got 200 amp breaker. How often are you all, when you're in electrical panels, I'm curious, are looking at the wire size to the breaker size? Is that something that you're looking at? Okay. I know sometimes when we replace electrical panels, and I'll do like a little snapshot of the existing breakers, and then later we come and like, oh man, they got the wrong size wire on the breaker. So we got to get the correct breakers. All right. So another thing, of course, it doesn't change. The same applies to the ATS as an electrical panel as far as clearance. So making sure that you got 30 inches of clearance in width and 36 inches in front, in depth, in front of the ATS as well. So there was an instance, and my wife reminded me, she helped me. That's my wife used to work with me. Gentlemen, she actually hired me to do some work. And then she ended up coming to work for me. And she actually worked good with her hands. She was working in the office, and one time I needed some help out in the field. And I said, you mind coming out and helping me? And she came out, and man, I was like, man, she has good mechanical skills. She has common sense and helped me very well. And so she started helping me in the field often. And so we're doing this, we replaced this panel and all, and we're doing this work around the meter. And they have all these shrubs and everything in front of the meter. Now, when I say in front of the meter, all of this is literally touching it. And so we're actually working tight, crawling back there, doing all this work. Now it's time for the electrical inspector to inspect. He said, I'm not inspecting that. You're going to have to remove all these shrubs. And I was like, man, we did all this work crawling around here, and he didn't do nothing but make the homeowner actually just remove this stuff because it didn't have the proper clearance. So this one was not in one of those instances where they're going to be grandfathered in. That didn't work in that instance. So definitely making sure you have the proper clearance is important. So here, of course, make sure that you have, the handle is present, everything locks up. All right, so one of the things I mentioned was the platform, making sure that you have the platform. In this instance, the home owner was an excavator. So he said, I'll make my own pad. I'll take care of all this. So he actually poured this pad. As you see, it is a slope because if you look here at the top, the grass is closer to the top and then at the bottom. So it is a slope. So he did a great form there for his concrete pad and laid that. So you want to make sure that the generator is level, and that will actually make sure that it actually runs and sees the gas and things of that nature. The exhaust here, of course, is away from the house and all as well. So making sure that you have a stable service. So back to this one here. Let's go here. The breaker. I believe the latest code here now says that this breaker actually can be installed behind the lock of this unit to turn it off. Now, so you don't have to lock this door now to be able to shut off the power. This breaker here is the generator power leaving the generator, feeding to the ATS and to the home. So if you ever want to kill the power going into the home, it's on the generator itself. This one, they come with GFCI outlets, as you see right there to the left there, there's a GFCI outlet as well. So in case of emergencies, or if you want to make mention to a homeowner that prime mover, that engine has to have a shutoff, emergency shutoff. And on the back of this generator, it has a button right here to shut it off. And you can turn that off to kill power. A lot of times if it's running, you're having a problem, I've actually ended up just closing the glass valve and things of that nature as well. But I've seen them where they did not have a shut off. And this one does have that shut off, so that you want to inspect that and maybe share with the homeowner, hey, that engine needs a shut off as well. So as you see this gentleman with his downspout there, you see it goes underneath. Why all of the great locations, good locations for a generator is right where the drain is. I don't understand that. But as you see, he ran it right underneath, and I think he took it about 35 feet away down the hill and all. So he ran it off the house there. Pretty good. Anybody have any questions before I move on to this next? Yeah. Okay. All right. Yes.
In terms of the pad, is there a tolerable pitch at which it has to be corrected if it's starting to sink?
Is
know
there
what I mean?
tolerable pitch?
In other words, if the generator is starting to sink in
Mhm.
some slant.
To be honest with you, I don't know. I would, the manufacturer always suggests that it's level. I've seen where they've had a pitch. I actually got a bad review on Google that one of my pads actually did some shifting and all. And so they didn't have, we haven't had any issues with that, but I would suggest that it is level. I think more it would, you think about the balancing of the engine and all, far as it being in an angle. And of course, if you have tank fuel as well, and if you're getting a little light and your gas, the way things are, I would just make sure that it's level.
Shut-off switch an option that you don't necessarily find on each one?
Well, earlier on, it wasn't required. Now it's required. So the code requires it. Yes. All right, so this gas regulator here, identifying the gas piping and things and making sure that it's painted, corrosion proof paint and sealing and things of that nature. So in this instance, at this gentleman's home, I don't do the gas personally. I usually sub the gas work out. And the company that I utilize has young technicians, and you guys know sometimes it don't matter what your age is. If you've been doing something for years or your experience, you might have been working with your dad or whatever the case may be, you've gone to school, you understand what's going on. So my client was referring to the folks that did the gas as kids. Those kids that were around there doing that. I have a guy that's doing my pool, and he says this generator is going to blow up because they didn't have a regulator on it. But these generators actually come with regulators inside of them as well. But, to appease him and all, they put the regulator on. And also, I think it's always, if you could be safer, why not be safer and just have it there as well? It's not required apparently, but from what I was told, and you guys may know more so than me coming from the meter of what the water columns are from the gas, does anyone know what it's regulated at? I think I read something like 3 to 7, and the generator starts having a problem if you exceed 13. So you should be good to go there. So another instance, in this instance where I had multiple service calls coming to this place is, so these generators now, I don't know if any of you guys have these at home, where they have what you call a mobile link. So wirelessly, it'll let you know that you're having a problem, and it'll let you know what that problem is, and it's like a safety, it's not going to start up. And it says over crank. So it's trying to crank, it's not getting the fuel, or something's wrong. And I go out to the place and this valve is shut. So I'm like, well, who would do that? This guy has all these cameras around shining. I'm like, you got to figure out who is actually turning this valve off for the gas to get to the generator. So we're going out there doing service calls and they shut it off multiple times. I'm wondering, well, nobody should be on your property anyway, as far as safety measures there. So now let's go into portable generators. Any of you guys have portable generators at home? Do you have the inlet as well outside where you plug into it? You do? Okay, you have the breaker interlock too? Or you like my old man? It don't have the interlock there.
What's that exactly?
The interlock? All right, let me show you. This right here. All right, so this breaker interlock here, basically, if you're having generator power on and you're feeding it back into the house, you can't power up the panel. Okay, the breaker is forced to be in the off position. So unless you turn off the utility breaker, that's the only way you can power up your house. So it interlocks with the main breaker. So usually it has to be the top one of the two top breakers, either one on the left or the right, it'll work. So that's what this interlock is. It installs very easily. And one of the things when you start reading up on this stuff is it's a safety measure, not just from having like let's say a phase-to-phase fault generator power with electrical utility, but the electrical is out for a reason. So if you're feeding back through this metering system, now guess what? Somebody's working on that line, on that transformer. You didn't actually backfed power to them and they get shocked or electrocuted. So it's not just protecting you from possibly having an explosion at your home, but also protecting the electrical servicemen on the other end of that. So it's to protect everyone there. But also think about this, when you have this, let's see, let's go back. Okay, my inlet picture must not have got in here. Okay, so the inlet is an outlet that mounts on the outside of your home. And it's a male in. And so, as we all know, wherever you're providing power, you would have the female in to protect you from the electrical contacts. And wherever you're receiving it, you're coming with the male in. And that's actually backwards in anatomy. You're right. Right? So that is one of the things that the code recommends, or actually says, that inlet should actually be labeled to know what size ground is appropriate. Grounding and neutral is appropriate. So for an example, as you were asking me about the bonding of that, is this generator, this portable generator, is the neutral attached to the frame or not? And all. So a lot of them come with the neutral attached because all of your you plug in your cords in and all, it has to have a point of reference for the ground. But if you're like feeding your house, you don't necessarily want that neutral attached. Now you got, they call it, objectional ground problems there. So it's good if you're feeding the house to actually have that neutral floating in the generator so that you have that bonding point in the panel. So sometimes I question, why do they actually use the L1430, you know, that 14 allowing you to have 120, 240, as opposed to having a 630, you know, where you're just getting the 240 volts and then the neutral being derived inside of the panel itself. I often wonder about why they do that. So that neutral realistically is not being used, although they have that 4-wire there. So it's something that I think that should be corrected and all, along those lines. So there is some code sections. If you guys have the National Electric Code, you know, in NEC 702.27, it has about the portable outlet, and it talks about the signing there, making sure, saying if it's a floating ground required or not. So you should have that labeled on it. So if you're going out to these jobs and you see an inlet, it should be labeled per code. So curious, does your software that you use have the code uploaded on it already?
Well, we're not actually allowed to reference or quote code,
Okay,
but we have our euphemisms.
okay, okay, okay. I thought I've read a report before where they had a code reference per Article 250 this, but you're not supposed to reference code?
Most of us have the code checkbooks and stuff like that, but we're specifically prohibited from referencing and quoting code in the report.
Okay,
In our licensing law. Yeah, in the licensing law.
okay,
But we have all kinds of euphemisms for warning people about stuff.
okay, okay. Great, 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 great. Okay. How much time is it so far? I'm just curious.
15 minutes,
15 minutes left?
15.
Okay, time flies when you're having fun. Okay, so a quick checklist here, guys, just kind of reviewing again with the ATS, just making sure that you have, you know, the proper clearance, manual transfer, you know, making sure that you actually have that interlock in place. I don't know if you all ever go walk around with gas meters and things to see if there's a nose test.
I use my code.
Okay, if you're going around checking gas and things of that nature, if you do the bubbles or anything of that nature, or just use the gas test. Now, my mother and my old man, they're kind of funny. They like oil and water sometimes. And my mom, she says she smells gas, and my old man says, you're not smelling gas. And so she ended up calling my brother. He's a firefighter. So he ended up coming over there with a gas meter and all. And of course, there's gas all in the garage somehow, shape, or form. And also, he did bring his meter and detected it. And if you go there, if you did the nose test there, I don't know what was going on with my old man. He just tell my mom she don't know what she's talking about, but it was definitely gas all in the in there. Just before I go on this thing about my mother, real quick, I replaced the switch before going into the garage there in the kitchen, leads into the garage. And this is one of those switches that have a night light. But my mom did not know the switch was replaced. So she came home and she's sitting like on the couch and she's looking over and she sees this light over there. And she says, before I call 911, that there's a fire on the switch there in the wall. And so she called me and I had to tell her it was a nightlight. She was ready to call 911 because she never saw that and thought it was a fire brewing in the wall. So it's pretty funny there. Of course, make sure you have the CO2 detection. The generator pad is nice, levels, placement, and all. Check your breakers, sizing, Portable generators, they suggest and recommend it is 20 feet away from the house and all, and your generator inlet and interlock. And also, you guys, I suggest reading National Electric Code. A few more code suggestions here is 250, of course, generators at 455. There, some gas stuff there. My buddy, who's an expert with the generators, definitely suggests Arrigo's Blue Book for the placement and setbacks of the fuel tanks as well. And I believe this one here kind of, you set it back, the depth and all of those nature. So I recommend reading Rigo. I don't know if you guys already do that when you're referencing the fuel tanks and things of that nature, storage tanks. Do you guys do anything with that? No? Okay. All right, so definitely check out Rigo Blue Book. So one of the things that I wanted to discuss before I wrap up here is just a quick overview of what I just discussed there. So I got a couple gifts, and I ask a couple questions, and I'll give away whoever answers the question correctly. So yes.
Just so you heads up, you can, on your screen there, kind of the big screen, TV on the floor, that shows the answers coming in from online too. So if you see the correct answer show up online,
Oh,
if I can put it out for you.
okay. All right, so let's think about this. What question would be good that's not simple? Too simple. What did I ask that you tighten up inside of the ATS? Who said that? That was quick. See? Give me two things that a lock nut are used for. And what else I mentioned? Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, there you go. Flashlight. Well, absolutely.
So the answer was bonding and to secure the connection.
Okay, secondly, I'll let me finish for the other two questions. One of the things I mentioned to you about was electromagnetic field. So what I have here, this tests RF and electromagnetic field, electric field. So it has a little audio to it as well. I don't know if you can hear it. So as we go back, if we go to this here, usually the safety measures are anything that's, safe levels 0 to 2 milligauss, 3 to 5. If you're pretty much over that, then there's a little problem over 5. So one of the things that took place in a house that I worked in, a guy called and asked me if I done any work. I had a couple people call me, and I says, no, I don't do anything with that. But let me tell you, I'm a great troubleshooter, and I'm pretty sure that I'll figure it out before I leave. And what had happened was you had a kid that had brain cancer. Now you see the levels here that they're telling you this moderate 3 to 5, where his pillow was 75. And he actually had brain cancer. You know what caused this? Actually, recessed lighting. Someone installing recessed lights caused this, where you have a 3-way system operation and all. They decided to intertwine the neutrals together. So you got one circuit over here controlling these lights and it's going over to another box that had neutrals controlling something else. They intertwine those neutrals. Now, usually the magnetic field kind of cancels each other out when it's in the same wire harness. But now you got this neutral on another circuit, so that magnetic field gets very wide. So what happens now, you're increasing the levels where now you have radiation in the house. So we were able to troubleshoot that and fix that and all. Another thing that actually causes your radiation is obstructed ground. So if you have like ground faults and things of that nature. So we found some where in tight spots like under cabinet lights, where someone may strip the wire and they got the copper exposed, just a little nick, and they put a cover plate on there or something and it's touching, but it's touching the white wire. So you know what? It's not going to trip. You're not going to know because the neutral and the ground are bonded at the panel. So they're like one at the panel, so you would not know. So sometimes you have people that have, they're very sensitive to toxins and their bodies can feel when there's a problem with elevated magnetic fields in the home. So this one lady house I was troubleshooting, I turned the electricity off and her heart rate declined. So she has what you call SEERS, is chronic inflammatory response syndrome. And they basically are sensitive to mold. There's a whole community where elevated levels of magnetic field actually causes mold to grow 6 times faster as well. So electromagnetic fields, of course, are in our bodies. It's all around us, and it's actually harmful. It can be harmful as well. So just keep in mind that little grounds and little things like that can hurt you. One of the things that will help prevent this, guys, are those arc fault breakers, believe it or not. If you actually have an obstructional ground, the arc fault breakers trip, just like a ground fault. So you can use those to fight this. But you know that there are thousands and millions of homes that do not have these arc faults already because they've been built years and years ago. So one of the suggestions and recommendations when I replace a panel, I'll bring this up, and my clients want to get this arc fault protection. So one of the suggestions that you guys is to get one of these meters. They sell them on Amazon. Walk around. If you get close to high levels, you start hearing the noise there. And if it gets above the 3.5 in an area, usually if you back up away from something about 3 feet, it goes down. So I suggest you get one of these walking around. If you want your clients to be safe, I suggest and recommend getting an EMF tester for sure. This one here is tri-field. Tri-field. So I suggest and recommend getting one of these. There is a whole community dealing with, they call it, and a suggestion to go to Building Biology Institute. They have what you call building biologists. And what they do is they definitely test the homes for sure. They test the environment. They do an environmental test as well, testing the air, and they test the EMF levels as well. And I felt good when I noticed that somebody had a neutral shag on the circuit, and I found it accidentally. And I told the woman she has elevated levels on this side of the house. And she actually told me that a guy came through and did an environmental test and told her the same thing. And I took a picture of his card, and I've done some work with him. And there's a whole community out there of folks making homes safer. And that's what we do. We value homes. So people's safety for sure. So quick question for you guys. Another question is, how far should a generator be from a door? What did you say? Yes, yes. So, it's kind of funny because the portable generator is 20. I wasn't specific enough there, so, I wasn't specific, so he said 21st. So you are, there you go. There you go, temperature gauge. Okay. Someone give me 2 ways that you can elevate EMF radiation in a home.
Or inside the wall. Neutral bonded with,
That's one.
Objectional ground, microwave.
That's one. So two ways. Yeah, that's one. That's one. Temporary. So the objectional ground, and it's another one. Come on, guys. The first thing that I started off with,
Sort of a metal case in a neutral wire.
that's an objectional ground.
3 ways.
Something with the 3-way switch caused what?
Oh, yeah, intertwined.
There you go. And here you're the fine winner of a EMF tester.
Oh, thank you. I do. Play around with it.
In older homes, this is not generator, but in older homes where you're doing a panel heavy up or whatever else, are all older wires compatible with arc fault control devices?
Yes. Keep in mind, if I'm recommending to a home who's done some work, so they may trip and they may require you to do some field investigating and things of that nature. So it's a good thing if they trip. So now you are identifying the problems that they have in the house.
Right.
Yes.
So a statement and a question for you, if you've seen this. We're seeing the electrification of homes where people pull out gas furnaces and put in heat pumps with electric backup. We've had certain electricians, they're not good electricians, but the generator is sized for the previous load or for heat and certain things in the home. But then they go and switch out the 15 amp, 110 volt for a 60 amp, 240 volt and don't consider the generator. And the generator pops as soon as they lose power and heat. So we're seeing that along with Tesla chargers that are added, and they don't realize that the whole home is on automatic transfer switch.
Right. Absolutely.
And all of a sudden the load is way more
Right.
immense.
Right.
So that's a statement for everyone in the room, but have you seen that happen? Because we have.
I personally haven't, but when you have those load challenges, you can kind of communicate with the homeowner to kind of manage their loads, but they do have load managing apparatus where it's load shedding modules. So if the electricity start getting high, you have different stages of which one load you want to cut off first. So this is non-essential. So this basically relay will open up so that your generator will continue to run and you not have any problems. So they have load shedding modules.